Good afternoon, everyone. Oh. We'll try this again. Good afternoon, everyone. At this time, I'd like to call to order the February 15th, 2024 regular meeting of the North County Transit District. Before we begin, members of the public who may be viewing the meeting on the district's YouTube page, please note that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. In addition, you must also register by sending an email containing your name or phone number and the agenda item on which you wish to speak to clerk@nctd.org. I will now ask Suhel Rodriguez, our magnificent clerk of the board, to call roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair Edson.
Present.
Vice Chair Patel.
Here.
Board Member Martinez.
Here.
Board Member Hinsey.
Here.
Board Member Garcia.
Here.
Board Member Robinson.
Here.
Board Member Desmond.
Here.
Board Member Jenkins. Board Member Contreras.
Present.
Board Member Lee. For the record, Board Member Jenkins and Board Member Lee absent.
Thank you. Board Member Contreras, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Suhel, could you please provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures?
Yes, Madam Chair. In case of an emergency, I will dial 911. In case of an evacuation, please take the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once clear of the building, do not re-enter unless cleared to do so by emergency personnel. There are fire extinguishers and first aid kits on each floor of the building. There is a portable defibrillator on the first floor and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures if needed. This concludes my safety brief.
Thank you. So Heller, do we have any changes to today's agenda?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any non-agenda public comments today?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. At this time, public registration to provide general public comments will end. Before we proceed, I have a couple of quick protocol items to share. First, I respectfully ask board members to please hold your comments and questions until after each agenda item has been presented. And when the time comes for your questions and comments, please raise your hand or catch my eye and wait until you're called upon to speak. Staff has reminded me that before speaking, we should turn on and speak into our microphones. I'm not sure if that was directed at me or not, but anyway, thought I'd share it. This will ensure that board members can be heard by those listening online or participating remotely. Lastly, I was advised that Vice Chair Patel has important city business to attend this afternoon. To ensure that she is present for the action portion of today's meeting, I would like to adjust the order of today's agenda. If there are no objections, I propose we move presentation items to the end of the agenda after other business. Any objections? Okay, seeing none, presentations will be heard after other business. Item B, approval of the minutes, is now the first item on the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the minutes for regular board meeting of January 18th, 2024?
So moved. This is Hinsey.
Motion by Hinsey, second by Garcia. Please call the vote.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? On the motion of Board Member Hinsey, seconded by Board Member Garcia, to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of January 18th, 2024, motion passes. Also, Madam Chair, for the record, Sharon Jenkins arrived at 2:02.
Well done, Sharon. There are 10 items on consent for action today. Suhel, have any members of the public requested that consent items be pulled?
No, Madam Chair. However, we did receive a public comment via email that was sent to the board prior to the board meeting and is also posted on our website for public inspection. Also on the record, show that Board Member Kent Lee arrived at 2:04.
All right, thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, for agenda item 4 specifically,
Okay,
the public comment.
thank you. And that was sent to the board, correct? Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, at this time, public registration to speak on consent items has ended. I don't wish to pull any items, but I have a disclosure related to item number 9. I'm a long-serving member of the FACT Board of Directors and will be voting on item 9 as an NCTD board member.
I'll go ahead and make the same disclosure. I've been an inactive member of FACT for the last year.
Thank you. That was Director Hensy. Director Contreras.
I also serve on the FACT board, but will be voting at NCTD and won't be working on this on the FACT side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any board members wish to pull any items from consent? Okay, seeing all the heads motioning no. I may have a motion to approve. consent
Motion to
items 3
approve by
through 12.
Contreras.
Okay. Motion by Contreras, second by Jenkins to approve consent items 3 through 12. Please call the vote.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? On the motion of Board Member Contreras, seconded by Board Member Jenkins to approve consent items 3 to 12, motion passes.
Thank you. This brings us to our only other business item, setting a public hearing to consider implementation of the proposed operation of the Sorrento Valley Coaster Connection Service. Chris Orlando, our Chief Planning and Communications Officer, and Katie Persons, Director of Service Planning, are here to present. Chris and Katie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and board members. We are here today to set the public hearing and ask the board to set the public hearing for the commencement of the Sorrento Valley Coaster Connection Service. First slide, please, Suhail. You will recall the board received an update from staff on this matter back in December. This stems from the MTS decision to discontinue service within the area adjacent to the Sorrento Valley Coaster Station, the 5 deviated fixed route service that they run through their MTS service. On October 19th, their board approved a discontinuation of that service. Since that time, or actually prior to that time, we've been doing public outreach in that area to take input about the value of that service, how the service should be implemented, and whether or not it should be continued, and if continued, what form it should take. Today, we're here to provide you a summary of that service, a summary of the outreach we received, and our recommendations for moving forward. And ultimately, we will ask the board to open the public hearing for us to take public input on the service. As the board knows, our major change service, which this would qualify under the board policy as, requires a 60-day public notice period for any major service change. And so the action today, if the board moves forward, would be to open that public hearing process. Over the next 60 days, we would take public input, and then we'd be back to you in April with what we heard from the public and ask the board to make a decision based on that input. So next slide, please. As you recall, this is the existing MTS service. It is 5 deviated fixed routes that run in commuter peak times, meaning Monday through Friday mornings and in the afternoons. This is the current service as it runs today. Next slide, please. As we noted in our prior presentation, this area is not only regionally significant, but it's very important for coaster ridership. So about 15% of our coaster riders use this station. As you know, this area is a regionally significant employment center. And not only is it significant for the region, many of our North County residents come to this area to do their work. And so about 15% of those traveling to the area come from North County. So as we looked at this, we deemed this as significant to our service. It is out of our service area, but because of its connection to the coaster station and because of its use by our North County residents, we felt it was significant to look at the possibility of continuing the service. Next slide, please. With that, I'll turn it over to Katie. She'll walk through the public outreach that was done and the recommendation for service.
Thank you. So as a reminder of that public outreach that we've conducted so far, in the fall, NCTD distributed a survey, conducted community presentations for employers and the Mira Mesa Community Planning Group, and briefed local elected officials and associations. The outreach included discussions with both riders and non-riders of the current SVCC service. Next slide, please. From that outreach, we heard the following high-level insights. The first being maintain the coaster connection. Folks are familiar with the service structure in place today, and it is a critical component of their complete commute and serves as a first last mile connection for many folks. The next was that we heard people wanted us to serve new areas in Sorrento Valley. That includes expanding access to other employers in the area and new potential customers within the Sorrento Valley area. And finally, we heard serve more coaster trips. So folks wanted us to serve a larger span of service so that they could utilize the coaster and have more options within their commutes. Next slide, please. So there are a couple of things that the service planning team considered when developing the service plan for the Sorrento Valley Coaster Connection Service. And that is that connections are critical, as always, but especially because if a customer misses their coaster, they may be waiting up to 40 minutes for the next coaster in the peak period. The next piece is that this is a new service area to NCTD, and there's both highly variable traffic in the area as well as a challenging street network with limited options for through travel. So all of that impacts NCTD's routing options as well as some of the scheduling parameters and constraints. Next slide. We also have a few key operational considerations for NCTD. That includes the deadhead distance from our existing bus operations divisions, which I'll talk about here and on the next slide. The vehicle storage and maintenance and vehicle availability, as well as fueling options for this service. So for both the vehicle storage and vehicle availability elements, we are working with MTS to execute agreements to transfer vehicles and onboard equipment to NCTD, as well as discussing use of one of their divisions to park our vehicles. Next slide. Focusing in a bit on the deadhead strategy in a bit more detail. Deadhead refers to the distance a bus must travel prior to the start of its route before it enters revenue service. We plan to use a shuttle arrangement to help minimize the mileage. So to operate this service, we would need to have NCTD operators report to our West Division facility consistent with proper protocols. But instead of having all 5 vehicles travel to and from Sorrento Valley for the peak periods, we're proposing to store most vehicles at MTS's Copley Division and have all operators shuttle together in one vehicle to that division. So while we can't reduce the operator hours associated with this deadhead maneuver, we can reduce our mileage and fuel expenses through that arrangement. Again, this piece requires an MOU with MTS, which we're coordinating with them on now. Next slide. Transitioning into our proposed service. So as a reminder, this is the routing that exists today as operated by MTS. Next slide. Here is our proposed routing in dashed lines. And then one more slide. Here's both existing and proposed routing to give you that complete picture. So again, NCTD's proposed service on this map is in dashed lines. To summarize some of the changes that we're proposing, we've made modifications to those orange, pink, and purple routes to help optimize them and improve the clarity of the routing and the locations that they serve. We are proposing to combine the 2 existing routes that serve UTC and UCSD into one route due to their length and proximity, which you'll see on the southern edge of that map, and that's shown in the blue dashed line. This routing also serves 3 Blue Line trolley stations and provides good connection in the UTC area. And so finally, with that routing consolidation, we're proposing to offer a new route shown in yellow that extends further east into Sorrento Valley, and that's to better serve employers like Dexcom, Google, Hologic, and a variety of other labs and businesses in that area. Next slide. We've estimated a rough order of magnitude cost for the service, which is subject to change based upon the public feedback, but is intended to provide context for NCTD's potential operation of the service. These numbers are based upon 5 flex routes and utilize flex per hour per mile averages to estimate the associated costs. So under the MOU with MTS, NCTD previously paid 50% of the cost of operations plus $1 per rider. Within that MOU that will terminate in June, NCTD was projected to pay approximately $387,000 in fiscal year 2025. And I'll walk through a few key cost considerations on the next slide. So again, the distance from our operating bases and core service area contributes to an increased hours and miles for NCTD to provide this service. Additionally, MTS currently utilizes what's called split shifts to operate the service, in which operators have a multiple hour break in the midday between shifts, which reduces their wage costs. This shift structure is not feasible for us due to the distance from our existing operating bases. Next slide. Should the board approve a public hearing today, NCTD will launch a website with an overview of the proposed changes and a brief feedback form for folks to provide input. We'll also host pop-up events at the Sorrento Valley Station that will include maps and visual guides, as well as an opportunity to provide feedback to NCTD staff. We're also coordinating with UCSD to host a pop-up event on campus. And finally, we'll participate in several community briefings, including iCommute's Moving Together event later this month, and we'll return to the Mira Mesa Community Planning Group with an update. We plan to reach out to additional community planning groups and town councils in the area to let the community know how they can provide feedback to us. Next slide. We have two key goals with this outreach. First, we want to receive feedback on the proposed routing to help us inform that final service plan that we'll bring back to the board in April. And second, we want to receive feedback on proposed coaster trips served in order to inform our scheduling. So with our proposed routing and operational plan, we'll have the opportunity to serve select coaster trips above and beyond the ones that are currently served today. So we'll be asking the public to help us inform which coaster trips they'd like to see us serve. And then that will help us structure the final schedules that we'll bring back to the board in April. So should the board agree to set a public hearing, NCTD will conduct outreach in the coming weeks. We'll also conduct an equity analysis consistent with board policies. We will refine the service plan and cost estimates based upon that public feedback, and we will then close the public hearing and present the final proposed service plan for board approval at the April 18th board meeting. And with this, the final proposed service plan is subject to the fiscal year 2025 annual operating budget process and available funding to operate the service. Next slide. The staff recommendation is to set a public hearing and authorize staff to receive public comment for the proposed Sorrento Valley Coaster Connection service. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Great presentation, lots of information. Board members, I'm going to start at this end because I'm seeing a nod over here. Start with me, start with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thanks for the presentation and all of the feedback regarding what we're going to do with regards to public outreach. One of the questions I had was around the new routes, and I wonder if we've received any feedback yet, or is that what's intended in the upcoming to see if the new routes that we're proposing, if there are any downsides to actually moving forward with those?
Exactly. Yeah, this will open the public hearing, which would allow us to discuss the proposed concepts in more detail with the public.
Okay, great.
That being said, we conducted outreach starting in September. And so this plan you see in front of you reflects the feedback we heard in that initial outreach. So it's both. Really.
Okay. And have there been any mentions of any downsides regarding the change in routes? I'm just curious, like have there been any folks that have said, well, actually, this route works. Why are we shifting it this particular way? I'm just curious to hear that feedback too.
We actually, this is the public review of the routes,
Okay,
the
that's
final
what I
route. They
was
haven't seen the
asking.
specific
Great.
routes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
That's what I thought. Okay,
yeah.
cool. All right, awesome. That was my question.
Okay, thank you. I think
Yeah.
Board Member Martinez.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It's very clear. Just out of interest sake, why did MTS decide to discontinue their service?
So in their October board meeting, they cited both budgetary concerns and ridership on these routes. We reviewed this in December with the board, and on the ridership piece, we feel for some of the changes that we've made and also just the feedback we're hearing in terms of a lack of marketing, a lack of outreach, that there's tremendous opportunity here that was perhaps not tapped. And so our plan's informed by the goal of exceeding the ridership that was achieved previously. In terms of the budget, our objective is to incorporate this within our operating budget, and so We hope to achieve that over the next coming months. It's our budget season, so we're working through that. Their major concern and budget also had to do with the vehicles. So there are 6 end-of-life vehicles that are currently operating the service. As part of the transition, they've agreed to transition those to us. And then we were able to designate a portion of funding that we received from the state in December, SB 125 funding, to place an order for new vehicles. And so pending the receipt of that funding, we'll be able to use the existing 6 vehicles to get us through a period of time until we can get new vehicles in place. So that was a big funding gap that they had that we were able to fill.
And would those new vehicles be electric?
We're looking at those options right now. They'd be traditional fuels. We haven't selected the vehicles yet. We have some infrastructure hurdles we'd have to work through to make them electric, meaning we'd have to have a place to charge them. But it's something we're looking at.
And then my other question is, public outreach is going to be really important. And if you do public outreach where people are already using the service, it might be beneficial to expand that and go to large employers where people aren't using the service and try to find out why and educate them on the opportunity. So that's just my suggestion. And then lastly, for a cost benefit, look at the whole thing. I think one key for success in the pilot is how much ridership is there. Obviously, if MTS canceled theirs due to lack of ridership, it would be important to know what the goals are for you to come back to us to say this would be successful. So I don't know if you thought about what those key points are of success that you would advise us to move forward with it.
Yeah, we haven't set specific ridership goals. I think once we do the outreach, we'll have a good idea of what the routes look like, service levels, all of that, where we could get to that point. I think internally, the discussions we've had about ridership is definitely exceeding, where they are. We think that is a floor of the ridership. One point I forgot to mention in the previous statement is that in addition to being impacted by COVID, which hurt these routes because this is a really large employment area, there was also a 2-month work stoppage that MTS experienced on this service. And so the service actually stopped and wasn't offered for 2 months. And so that significantly impacted the ridership as well. And so, our position is that with better communication marketing, as you suggested, and really, paying attention to where the service goes and being responsive to the local community, we can achieve higher goals. But we will look at setting some ridership goals as we go through the public input process.
Thank you.
Dr. Hensy.
Thank you. I'm really pleased that we're in a position that we can take this on and at least try it and see if we can capture some of these trips. In my perception, it makes a lot of sense, being that this is such a great coaster stop for us, and we already have those riders, so we have sort of a captive audience here. I have 2 questions, and the first one is about the employees. I think, was it deadhead? Is that the term? So do they have to check in at Oceanside? Everybody's got to check in Oceanside. So it wouldn't make sense for us to try to do some of our operator recruitment closer to the new routes.
No, and that's based on the work rules for the operator group. So that's where they would have to check in. And there are also some dynamics with using the MTS facility that wouldn't make it possible for us to have the employees check in for their workday at that facility. So we for a variety of reasons, we have to have them check in at our West Bus facility.
I see. And then the second question relates to what Board Member Martinez commented on with the outreach. A pop-up event at UCSD, that's great to do something in person. And I hope that we can use other channels as well. Like, is it students mostly we're trying to capture, or more employees at UCSD?
Employees as well. We're coordinating through their transportation services group, and they suggested a pop-up to help reach staff and faculty in addition to students.
Okay, great. Yeah, so whatever we learn from that in-person activity, how can we reach more people that might not be on campus at that one time we do that one pop-up, I think is important to consider as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Garcia.
Thank you. Appreciate all the hard work put into this. And my questions were in regard to the outreach, and they've pretty much been answered, asked and answered. So at this point, I will, what is that called? Send my time back, yield my time. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments there? Director Desmond?
Thank you. And thanks for the presentation. And you probably already answered these questions, but I can't remember. So, how many more have we buses that, do we have to purchase more buses, or we're using the same number of buses? These are routes that we don't have now. So what are we doing for equipment?
So initially, MTS is transferring the buses that they currently use for the service to us. So we'll take, if we're in the process of negotiating that transfer with them right now. They are at the end of life. So we're able to do that at very little cost from them. We've already inspected them. We think they can be operational for a period of time. We'll rewrap them in NCTD branded, wrappings. And then, as I noted earlier, we have funding identified for a replacement fleet that will come over time.
And as far as personnel, we're already kind of short on personnel, but we're going to have to hire more people to do these routes.
Yeah, so we've made great progress on personnel. So we're at I would say the highest point we've been at in terms of operator availability. We will, as a part of setting up this operation, expand our operator pool because this service will be operated as flex service. So it's the pool of lift and flex operators. So it's different from our fixed route service. And so we are right now negotiating with our bus operations contractor, MV Transportation, to expand the pool of operators.
We might be able to hire, maybe MTS has extra drivers now if we're taking these routes, but probably not. So we're taking, I didn't realize that. So we're taking MTS buses and we're going to operate those. Are those comparable to ours? Are they a whole different animal? I don't know.
They're similar to they're called cutaways, which is the on the far right, you see on our little PowerPoint slide, it's the footer, it's the far right vehicle there. They're called cutaways. So yes, a very similar vehicle to that. They have a different make and model than we use, but it's one our maintenance team is comfortable working with.
Okay, so
yeah,
we have parts and
all
they're
those
giving
things,
us their own buses, huh?
Yes.
All right. I guess I'm just kind of skeptical because the MTS got rid of this for a reason. And I realize there's opportunities out there. So I would like to see, and I'm not sure if we've already considered this, is okay, what's the ridership now that MTS has? And then maybe, okay, after we take it over for 6 months, what are our numbers? So I think I'd like to see those come back to the board periodically so that we can see, are we gaining, losing, getting any better? And I'd like to see us outperform what MTS was doing, for sure. But so I'd like to have at least, I don't know, whatever it is, every 6 months, quarterly, whatever updates that I think would be appropriate for this, so we can see if we're on track.
Okay, absolutely.
Thanks.
Director Jenkins?
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions. Is this a pilot or is this a permanent situation?
No, this would be additional route, so it's not a pilot situation.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And you might have touched on this briefly, but I want to just ask again. In previous conversations we've had about this, when we heard their decision to remove this from their workload and give it to somebody else. We had discussed about talking to other employers, and it sounds like you have been doing that. Do you have more to reach out to that are a good possibility, or have we hit all of them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Okay. We've been working very closely with Biocom, who has been a great representative for biotechnology, life sciences employers in that region. Also through the Mira Mesa Community Planning Group, we've connected with larger employers like Qualcomm, and through iCommute, we're going to be a speaker at their webinar series, and we've been providing information to iCommute for them to distribute to their employer contacts as well since the fall, and we will do that through this public outreach process. So we have definitely multiple connections that we're utilizing to help get the information out, so that one, we can receive feedback, but then also set us up in the future as long-term connections to help market the service.
Okay, and some of these businesses that we've connected with, do we know which ones already have maybe shuttles from the coaster station to their work, because that would be free, I'm guessing, to those riders, but we're gonna be charging. So are we looking at how that's gonna work?
So the mode of service that we're proposing for this would be our flex category. And so currently, flex service is included in the monthly and daily coaster passes. So with a valid coaster fare, it's included basically in that cost. We are evaluating some other options for folks who maybe don't have a daily pass. But for the most part, this would be included in the cost of someone who has a valid coaster fare.
And on the employer shuttle, so we have identified and talked with the employers who operate their own shuttle, and through the outreach, we've done the surveying, we've found that this service actually is a good complement to those services, because a lot of times those employer shuttles run on a very limited schedule in a very limited span. So employees, if they miss it in the afternoon run or they miss the morning run, they don't have any other option. And so even those that took the employer-based shuttles valued this service because it gave them another way to connect when they might not be able to use the employer shuttle. Because the employer shuttle services, those are pretty limited spans of service, meaning how long they run, how many times they run in a day is pretty limited.
Okay. And I think the question about the EV is important. Does their Copley facility have EV infrastructure yet? Because
I'm not sure about that, but I can tell you that our use of that facility is going to be very limited to parking only, for a variety of reasons, liability, work rules, all sorts of things, the details of the of the sausage that we make in doing transit. And so we're keeping this a very light engagement, and our use of that facility will be pretty limited to just parking the vehicles there. Our operators will show up in the shuttle, get in the 5 vehicles, go do the route, come back, get in the shuttle, come back up to West Bus. So it's a pretty limited, using their infrastructure, whether it be electric charging or fueling, those sorts of things would add a level of complication that it just make it much harder to do.
So they're going to charge us $72,000 to park there?
The $72,000 is for the vehicles themselves are at end of life. So there's we're $10. We're so far that's the price, $10. We're working on it though. But the $72,000, there's a lot of onboard equipment on the vehicles themselves. So the radios, the Pronto equipment, those sorts of things that we'll be purchasing as a part of the transfer. So that's the $72,000.
Okay. And let's see. You said when you said the transition, the vehicles to us, is that where they're going to sell us to? Is that the $10?
Yeah.
They're going to sell $10 per vehicle. Okay. And then my other question is, how common is it for transit districts to take over an area outside of their normal sphere?
It's not uncommon. So we already do this with our 101 service, runs into the same area, into UTC, into the UCSD area and down into UTC. So we already run service in this area. So it's not unheard of. This level, I think, is a different level of it. It's more than you would normally typically see, but it's not uncommon. MTS runs their commuter service into our Escondido facility. So,
True.
so there is back and forth.
Okay. And then just to confirm, I saw on one of the slides a $933,000 cost. We would have paid MTS $387 anyway, but they only collected about 50% of their cost. So are we hoping to collect 50% of our in the future? Because first year would have been that 387, but next year it's 0. So it's $1 million cost to us.
Yes,
that
so
correct?
that's right. So a couple points on that. First is our operating costs, for the reasons that Katie went through in terms of the deadheading and the staging, will be more than theirs were, because it's just more expensive for us to run it, given the logistics of it. They have not indicated a willingness to enter into a reciprocal arrangement as we had now. We've also had discussions with Sandag and haven't had a lot of traction there. So this will be as we noted, incorporated within our operating budget process, this spring and as we put that together. Our goal, however, would be to work on finding additional funding for this. Given the timelines, we needed to stand up the service because we didn't want there to be a discontinuation of service. If there's a gap between when they stopped and when we started, you'd lose even more ridership. So we didn't want that to happen. So we're I think hopeful might be a strong word, but we will continue to look for additional funding. We had a really good meeting yesterday with Biocom and a number of business owners and property owners were in that meeting. And there was some desire there from the property owners to support as well. So we think there could be additional funding options, but at this point, we haven't identified any.
Okay. So, yeah, always interesting that certain agencies want to support transit, but yet when it comes right down to it, they don't want to financially support it. Just a comment. Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Director Contreras, do you have comments?
I do. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. One of the things that I'm really curious about, so I see that the increase from NCTD's side is going to be this $546,426. If we decided to not move forward with taking this additional responsibility, what's the cost of that to NCTD potentially? Has there been like a analysis done, losing X amount of ridership, that kind of stuff? I'm just curious to see what those variables are.
Yeah, I don't have a dollar figure for you, but that 15% of coaster ridership that uses the station would, in our view, be endangered because it would be very difficult to get from the coaster station to the other areas of interest in the Sereno Valley area. So from our perspective, that 15% of coaster ridership would be endangered without this service.
And we can pretty safely say that the 15% that utilize the station also utilize this service or a similar service that MTS has to get to their end destination.
Yeah, it varies. Obviously, each rider is going to do a different thing, but yeah, we think that this service is critical to not only like keeping that 15%, but also trying to grow the number of folks who use it.
And potentially with the different conversations that NCTD has had with different employers, what do we expect a potential growth in ridership to look like? If we're at 15% now for this station, do we anticipate that we could double that?
Again, I don't have a ridership projection for you today. I can tell you there's a lot of interest. Even in conducting outreach, I think we've generated more awareness for the service. Not many, some weren't aware that it was there. Both in terms of just general awareness and then engagement around not just, looking at funding opportunities, but looking at ways to sell transit passes to employer, to their employees through the employer. We have programs to facilitate that. So there's lots of benefits to the outreach itself. Again, as we finalize the service plan, I think we can provide some projections and some metrics around ridership.
Yeah, I think that's going to be important. I also want, the picture for the board to be very clear. If there is a cost to NCTD for not moving forward with this really important connection to the largest job center in the region, we need to be able to see that in black and white, like picture books for elected officials. Okay. So that's what I would love to see come back to the board. I found one of the challenges to be really interesting, the highly variable traffic area.
Yeah.
Are we talking about only in this proposed service area, or are we also talking about, the bus operators having to drive or shuttle over from Copley to the station?
It's a little bit of both. Primarily in our thoughts in developing the service plan and the schedules, what we were noticing is that within the immediate area around the station at peak periods, a lot of the congestion would back up and it's challenging for the operators to access the station in time to make that connection to the coaster. So we wanted to make sure any changes we were proposing was not going to put us at risk of missing that coaster connection. And of course, we don't have our own operational data that we can reference like we would maybe in other areas of the service area. So that is a key piece that's missing for us, but we can use as much data as we're able to access now to help inform that service plan. But what we did notice is that just because of the number of employers in the area, the large educational institutions and hospitals there, it definitely varies by day and by time of day, the types of traffic and amount of traffic you'll see around the station.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I'm curious about is, have we interfaced with the city of San Diego regarding this challenge of highly variable traffic area? Because I don't know if there's transit priority in this area, and that could really positively affect NCTD. Right now, this seems like an insurmountable challenge, but the infrastructure could be adapted to better prioritize North County Transit District in these particular areas. Has there been any communication with the city of San Diego about, I know I'm sitting right next to Councilmember Lee, but have we been having those types of discussions?
Not in relation to this project. Yeah, no, we haven't had those discussions. There's been, long-term discussion around the Sorrento Valley Coaster Station in general, but not related to this specific project.
I think right now is a serious time for us to turn up the heat on that discussion because there's a lot of benefit that NCTD and the city of San Diego and these employers would have if we could facilitate more rapid transit for NCTD. So I would really appreciate if that's something that we could have a discussion about. And then, kind of launching off of that point, the Sorrento Valley Station is very disconnected. When I'm on the coaster, I don't usually get off there. But what I do see is a lot of other folks that have e-bikes. And it is a very hostile area. So some of that is more city of San Diego, right? Where there needs to be more investments in connecting active transportation, connecting, employers to that station. We're going to be, doing these routes. But are we looking at any point updating the Sorrento Valley Station itself?
Yeah, again, same long-term discussions, not in relation to this project, but that reimagining of that area has been a sort of long-term discussion with the city, but nothing current has happened with that recently.
And has that ever been brought to the board for just a update?
I don't recall. I'd have to check with the development team to see if the board's got an update on that.
Yeah, I think it would be great to get a lot more. I mean, this is a big investment that we're making, potentially, if, the board chooses to go in that direction. So I think that any kind of long-term changes should also be coming back to the board, at least for us to have discussion and input, and see if this is something that we could prioritize. I mean, it being our third most frequented station is a big deal. And if it doesn't come to the board, I would love for it to come to MISPEDA, where I chair. So, okay. Let me see here. Bus operators. So I didn't hear it cited as one of the issues that MTS is not continuing this, but I believe that we might be doing a lot better in bus operator recruitment and retention than perhaps MTS is. Did they talk about not having enough operators to do this as a issue?
They primarily cited budget reasons, but
Which could potentially be
both. Yeah. Yeah.
You could kind of hold
Yeah.
funnel in bus operator costs and not being able to do. Okay. So I'm glad that we're anticipating that we're going to have enough bus operators because we're trying to get to our frequencies on our routes right now. And so to be able to expand into other territories and create a system that also has a lot more frequency there is challenging, but I'm encouraged by the numbers that you all have been bringing back to us as this challenge. Seems like we're catching up to the challenge. Now, as far as you did cite some of the costs being for things like the Pronto system, right? Updates. And this might be a little bit off topic, but is that new technology going, are we closer to the open loop system where folks can just tap and go?
Yes.
Okay, because that, I mean.
So can we stay on topic a little bit though?
Yeah, and no, the reason that I ask, and so I'm gonna make the connection right now.
Okay, thanks.
Is that if we're trying to attract more ridership, sometimes the Pronto system is very difficult. So we could, I don't know if we're marketing to these employers that, hey, you don't have to go through the whole Pronto pass kind of thing. You might be able to, you know, tap your card, your credit or debit card or whatever the case might be, your phone. Are we kind of rolling that into our conversations with the employers, or is it too early?
We will when
Okay.
that capability is ready, and we are very close to that, to giving you an update on that and
Awesome.
being live with that. And good news, we will present an update on that to Ms. Bede-
Yes.
on the Ms. Bede-
Awesome. Yeah, for those of you who are going to be on that, we might have like a 4-hour meeting that day. Sorry. And my last question, and I thought it was a really good, and I know over there you hate that I ask so many questions, but you're going to have to take it. So there was mentioned over here about reporting the performance. Because this is going to be not a pilot program, you know, the board does receive performance metrics. So is this going to be part of that monthly agenda packet? So
Yes.
we'll see the numbers on there.
Yes, yeah, it'll be part
Okay.
of the monthly transit
Perfect.
operations report, so you'll see. it.
Sounds great. All right, well, those are all my questions, and actually, to save time, I will.
Please don't yet. If you can hold off for a minute, we haven't had public comment.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
thank you.
All right.
And I believe that Director Lee may wish to speak, and I have a couple of other board members who now have new questions. Thank you,
Sure.
but I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for having me as well. So certainly happy to speak on behalf from the city of San Diego perspective. Thank you to staff, Chris and Katie, for bringing this forward and doing quite a bit of analysis on this. I think the MTS question is a really fair one. I'll be frank in ways that I think some of you cannot be as frank about, but in serving the district that really encompasses much of where this service would be utilized. And in speaking with Council President Pro Tem LaCava, who serves in the neighboring district that covers at least some of the route, both of us have emphasized some degree of frustration with the lack of communication coming from MTS, specifically about this proposed service change. I think we learned about it a little bit on the later end. And to be very frank, some of the major employers, Qualcomm, Biocom, and others, they really only heard about this 3 days before it went to a vote at MTS. So that being put aside, I think that is just a bit of frustration, because I think if there was more time for them to hear input, they might have had a slightly different perspective, perhaps. It is true that I think some of the factors that they have been working off of are a reduced amount of ridership from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. I think there's no question that there was a shift during the pandemic timeframe. A lot of folks, weren't working in office for some time. I think another factor that they probably don't want to say out loud as much is just the reality that this is a series of routes that I think we understand largely services North County residents. So it may not be in the NCTD service area specifically geographically, but the users of the service are the ones coming off the coaster for the most part. And MTS is not cutting servicing of the station itself. They still have routes that actually will connect to Serrano Valley, but what's being lost is this connection to all of the local employers. So I would say that there's been a lot of engagement, I think, with Biocom, with Qualcomm and others in recent months, which has been appreciated. Council President Pro Tem LaCava and I were both at the roundtable with Biocom yesterday, which we found to be very helpful. I was actually quite surprised. There were some members that were in attendance there representing their employers who themselves utilized the service and expressed a pretty extreme amount of frustration that the cut was actually being considered. Some of them have prided themselves on encouraging a number of their employees coming from North County to utilize the coaster as an option. And so they, I think, see a lot of value. And I think one thing that has been echoed in return is simply that there hasn't been a lot of marketing. So I think as someone said yesterday, putting up a signpost, on a bench somewhere doesn't necessarily mean that their employees know that this is a service to utilize. So their commitment that I think that will be very helpful is to actually work to help get the word out. And I think fairly in return, there's got to be some discussion about whether we can get support from the employers there. And that reciprocal support from MTS is something that I know Councilmember LaCava and I would both be happy to advocate for. So I cover University City and Sorrento Valley. As you have all heard, it is one of the biggest employment regions within all of San Diego. And so there is a significant amount of potential for use there. With a lot of the plan update changes coming from the city of San Diego, there is a significant push for ridership outside of their vehicles, and many of the companies that have developed there or are looking to develop are committed to actually making a significant push on that front. So they're going to need these options. I do want to share that we appreciate two changes in this plan that I think will be helpful considering the change from what MTS was providing. One is that continued loop covering both UCSD and the UTC area. As you might know, the Blue Line, the trolley that now delivers into the University City area has 5 stations in the area. And so I think the selling point back to MTS here is frankly that this is the only major connection during work hours from the coaster to the Blue Line. And until some other option is sort of created to fill in that gap, this is what exists currently. And it goes both ways. The second is that by combining those 2 routes in the University City area, the new route that extends east into Sorrento Mesa, Mira Mesa, is just something new that will help cover another set of employers and touch into some housing areas that have not been previously touched as well. So I think our hope is that we'll see continued sort of reciprocal usage on that front. Yeah, I think my last note would just be that certainly we'd love to encourage that NCTD considers moving this to the public hearing phase and hopefully adopts the route. But we do think that ultimately, if it's going to be successful, it's all down to outreach and engagement. And how do we make sure the employers play a significant role in letting their employees know that this is an option for their use. Maybe the last thing about the Sorrento Valley Coaster Station, we've certainly kicked up some conversation, especially since we took office. We'd love to chat with NCTD and Sandag further about it. Most folks probably aren't as familiar, but there is a pretty significant amount of traffic congestion, especially heading northbound off the 5, dropping right into the station as it currently stands. There's long been a proposal to actually move the station so that crossing is not at grade, and we have the grade separation that would allow traffic to flow freely. That would be a significant desire, I think, from employers that are within the region. But, that's a much bigger discussion. So we've got it on our radar, just got to figure out how to actually move forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments, Director Lee, and for giving us some insight into a part of the service area that we don't usually touch. I have a couple of questions, and then I'm going to move back to Director Desmond and Jenkins, who have follow-up questions of their own. So my first question or comment is public-private outreach to employers. So this is something that Director Martinez touched on, and which, as you're aware, I've touched on and suggested in the past. And with that in mind, I was curious about Illumina and whether Illumina has a van of their own.
Yes, they do. Illumina has a van as well as the VA and Qualcomm and a few other smaller shuttles.
I think that there might be an opportunity to do public-private where maybe they don't need to run their own vans. Maybe they're giving us money and their employees then have some sort of pass to be able to use the service. But, this is up to you to negotiate. So just putting that bug in your ear. My second thought, I know I have a number 2 here. Oh, the Blue Line trolley connections. So this service will go to the Blue Line trolley connections, which I think is great. There's always been that, how do we get people from the coaster to Sorrento Mesa, to the biotech companies? And and to UTC. So I think that's all very important. My question is, are we making sure that the routes that we have are timed appropriately so that if someone does get on at a trolley stop and wants to make a coaster connection, that they're going to make that coaster connection and not have to wait for an hour or 3 for the next coaster?
Yeah, our primary scheduling parameter will be that connection to the coaster. And so we'll structure those schedules to ensure that folks have that connection.
Awesome, because I have mentioned in the past that I took the trolley to the Blue Line trolley from after a Sandag meeting that went a little long, and thought, this is great. I can catch the 101 bus to get back to Solana Beach. And I missed that bus by 2 minutes when it got to UTC, and when the trolley arrived at UTC. And so I had to wait another half an hour or so. And that led to me arriving at the same time as the coaster that had I just waited an hour downtown, I would have been on. But I did get to ride the Blue Line trolley, which was pretty cool. It's just that timing is really important, I think, for all of our riders. The $72,000 for the equipment purchase that comes with the vehicles, I'm assuming that that purchased equipment will be able to be transferred to the new vehicles we are purchasing. Is that correct?
Yes, or we would install new equipment into the new vehicles and then you can repurpose the other equipment if it was still usable.
Okay, so hopefully it can be repurposed
Yeah,
for that cost.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. And those are my questions. I think so. So I will move back to Board Member Desmond.
Thank you, Chair. And I got I guess a mechanic question here, mechanical. You say you're going to take 5 bus drivers down in the morning, is that it? And bring them back in the evening?
Not exactly.
How's that? Yeah, because I'm wondering how many hours.
It's gonna be an SAT question. You ready? Is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
So
all
no-
the above is not the right.
Yeah, so they'll carpool down from West Bus. They'll board their vehicles for their routes. They'll run their routes. Then they'll board again and go back to West. But as Katie noted, there's a nuance in the presentation. It's not a split shift, so there's actually 2 shifts. So then
Okay.
another group will come down and do the afternoon commute time, do the same
Okay.
cycle and go back.
I didn't
That-
catch
that's
this
part of the
second
cost.
shift. It's like, well,
Yeah,
these-
so MTS ran this as a split shift, so because they didn't have that long period, they could run it as the same shift, so the morning operator had a 4-hour gap in the middle of their day where they didn't get paid, and then they got paid limited, but then they had the afternoon shift, so our operators that's not a popular shift, to
No.
be honest.
no, so you'd have 2 shifts essentially.
We'd have
Okay.
2 shifts, exactly.
Okay, and then what kind of frequency? I guess that's gonna be worked out with the outreach, but once an hour, once every half hour, is there?
At a minimum, we would say serve the same coaster trips as served today. But with the different shift structure, we are able to serve either some earlier in the PM peak or later in the PM
Okay,
peak,
I
just
don't
depending.
understand that answer.
Sorry.
So every half hour, every hour?
The coaster runs every 40 to 20 minutes, depending on the time of day. So roughly every 40 to 20 minutes when each coaster arrives at the station, you'll be served
Okay.
with
and then-
the
and then-
connecting service.
So is that to I don't know, to one of these employers,
Mhm.
is it gonna be every 20 or 40 minutes then? From them?
Every 40 minutes,
Every 40
the
minutes?
routes will cycle into the station.
Okay, all right,
Mhm.
okay, thanks.
Board Member Jenkins, and if we can make this really quick, because I'd like to get to a vote before Board Member Bhat Patel leaves, or Vice Chair Bhat Patel leaves.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. You mentioned earlier, I think, about MTS sharing their information about their current. Yes, they are sharing, or no, they're not sharing?
We've received some ridership data and we've received information and maintenance histories on the vehicles.
Have you received everything you need?
Not everything, but we're working with them on it.
Okay, that's what I want to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Suhel, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Am I seeing a hand up over there? No. Okay, thank you. Board Member Contreras, I believe that you may have a motion for us, and would that be to set a public hearing and authorize staff to receive public comment to propose Sorrento Valley Coaster Connection Service?
Madam Chair,
Yes,
excuse
ma'am.
me. We have a raised hand on our Zoom link for a public comment. Would
Okay,
you like to?
Thank you. Hold that thought. Please call the speaker.
Chris Kate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My apologies for, I think I accidentally hit the lower hand button, but appreciate the opportunity just to speak very briefly on this and appreciate the questions that have been asked thus far on this. My name is Chris Kate. I'm calling on behalf of the Mira Mesa Community Planning Group. Really to thank you all for the great questions that have been asked regarding this proposed service to make it very successful. I will agree with some of the other members of the board who've tried to impress upon you to not use the previous operator as a baseline for the potential that exists for this service. Really appreciate staff's effort to be more creative on how to maximize the service that will be hopefully provided coming off the coaster station to all the employers in the Valley and on the Mesa and University City and others. I think there's really a great opportunity that does exist if we're creative about it. And the community, the business community themselves are also helpful, which I think you're hearing loud and clear from folks that they are supportive of this effort. So would appreciate your support in moving forward on this. We'll say on a real quick other note, if you are going to move the Serrano Valley Coaster Station, which I really hope that is done, you move it west and not east, move it west towards all the employers. So thank you very much again for the time.
Thank you. And Madam Clerk, do I understand we have another speaker online?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Please call the speaker.
Melanie Cohn.
Good afternoon. Yes, this is Melanie Cohn. I'm Senior Director of Regional Policy and Government Affairs with Biocom California. Councilmember Lee pretty much said everything I was going to say, so I'll just echo his comments. The life science industry is very interested in seeing this service continue. I've been in this position for 10 years and have been trying to get MTS to increase their marketing. We've offered public-private partnerships as were discussed during this meeting. Our industry is very open to all of these possibilities and providing funding for them. So I just want to throw that out there. We had a great meeting with Councilmember Lee and Council President Pro Tem LaCava about this yesterday, as was mentioned as well. And we just really want to see this service continue and are willing to work with NCTD in any way that we can. And shout out to the NCTD staff who really have been awesome to work with, much in contrast to the previous operator. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments and for the support for NCTD and for our staff. Now, Director
Yes.
Contreras.
I will go ahead and move staff's recommendation, which was voiced by Chair Edson.
And I would second that. Motion by Contreras, second by Edson. Please call the vote.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? On the motion of Board Member Contreras, seconded by Board Chair Edson, to set a public hearing to consider implementation of proposed operation of Sorrento Valley Coaster Connection Service. Motion passes.
It's now time for two presentations that we moved here earlier. Both are information only and will not require a vote. The first of two on our agenda is an update to the presentation that the board received in December regarding the NCTD Plus microtransit service. Chris Orlando, Chief Planning and Communications Officer, hasn't even moved. He's still here. And Nick Sofel, our Director of Strategic Planning, will be presenting this item. Chris and Nick, you have our attention.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 1 second to get the right report. Okay. Oh. So Nick and I are here today to provide you with an update on NCTD's implementation of microtransit. Our branded name for this service is NCTD Plus. And so we, as the board chair noted, we provided the board with an introduction to this service at the December meeting. So today we're coming back with an update on our implementation plan. Next slide, please. So just a brief reminder about what microtransit is and how we will execute it. So in April 2023, NCTD executed an agreement with Spare Labs to implement the software as a service platform to allow us to implement microtransit. For those that might not know, so microtransit in the way we will execute it is a on-demand app-enabled service that provides point-to-point rides within defined geographic area. You can tell I practiced that line. There's a mouthful. But this is these are 6 to 10 mile zones at which with the app, you can call a ride in one of our vans, which looks a little bit like that, not quite like that. And they will take you from point to point and hopefully connecting to one of our transit stations along the way. This service provides a really critical first last mile service for our transit centers and stations. And it also allows us to serve hard to reach areas where there might not be infrastructure that is efficient for fixed route service. That being said, this is a flexible service, but it's also in relation to our other services, a more expensive service. And we'll get into a little bit about that. The zones must be created and prioritized with care. We've been, as you'll see through this presentation, very intentional and thoughtful about how we are implementing this. And that is recognition of the cost in terms of both budgetary dollars, fleet, operators, all the things that are our resources. So we're being very methodical and intentional how we do this. And that's because this is a resource intensive service. Next slide, please. Just to give you a sense of where on the spectrum of service this fits. So on the right, you have on the left is our traditional fixed route service, our Breeze bus. And then on the other end, you have where you've seen a lot of implementation recently of neighborhood electric vehicles. Microtransit fits sort of in between. So these are generally 9 to 10 person vans that operate within a defined area. Not as much capacity as a fixed route vehicle, but more flexibility, more range, more able to operate in a larger environment than you'd see with your neighborhood electric vehicles. And next slide, please. We want to provide just a comparison of what that means in terms of resources. So this is a modal comparison, and what you see here is, if you had an hour to move 60 people, what would it cost in terms of vehicle need, vehicle capacity, operator need, and then total costs? The icons there are proportional, so they reflect the actual costs, and you can see how this fits within that range of modal comparison. The microtransit gives you more flexibility, but as you see, it is more intensive because of the number of passengers you can move, the vehicles, operators required to do it. That is all to say that this service provides a very important service, but it's an important service in the range of things we provide, and the trick is finding the right use case for it and applying it in the right way that it maximizes efficiency. Next slide, please. So as the board will recall, in the December meeting, we presented 14 conceptual zones that we went designated for analysis. So over the last few months, we've conducted that analysis, and what you'll see today is the outcome of that analysis and our desire to implement a pilot program in some of those zones. Next slide, please. This is the same slide you saw in December. This is the basis on which we assess the zone. It was a data-driven analysis based on these 4 categories. These categories each carried equal weight, so 25% for each category. And we used a data analysis to assess the criteria in each of these categories. If you went through your staff report, what you'll see is the result of that detailed analysis. There's about a 50-page document that walks through each of the zones and the results on a zone-by-zone basis under this criteria. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick Stoffel, who walked through the suitability analysis and the implementation plan.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon. Next slide. So of the 14 zones, we found that 4 of those zones in particular have the most optimal suitability for microtransit service. And so our proposal for implementation is to do a 12-month pilot in each one of those 4 zones. Instead of having them all go at one time, we want to stagger the implementation of them. One, that helps us to reduce a little bit of the budget pressure from having to do all the service at once. But secondly, it allows us to be able to learn from each of those pilots that happen early on and make adjustments as time goes on. So if we figure out in best practices, there's certain things we should change that are going to be better for ridership and to improve the service, we want to know those up front. So by staggering them, we're going to be able to incorporate those learnings into the future pilots and to be able to hopefully have better results over time. There's going to be set evaluation and monitoring for those 12 points. We want to have a lot of transparency around it about what the impacts, what the quality of service is, how folks feel about the service. We're going to be doing customer sentiment analysis, for instance. How do you rate this? Do you rate it 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars. We want to know from the customer perspective, as well as from the operational perspective and the efficiency cost perspective, how this service lines up to be able to move forward. And as a part of that as well, implementation, we're going to be looking to explore those partnerships with other agencies and entities in the community to see how we can find additional funding to be able to keep this program moving long term. So next slide. Without any further ado, these are the results of the suitability analysis. The full 40, 50-page analysis is included as an attachment, and there's some really great one-pagers that have detailed information on each individual zone. So to walk through, these were the 4 areas that were rated the most optimal suitability for a pilot program based upon those 4 categories that were included in the analysis, each at 25% apiece. The dots you see that are fully, or the pies that are fully shaded in, those are the categories where the zone received the most optimal suitability. That 3/4 pie is high suitability, half a pie is moderate, and if it were a goose egg and kind of, in the middle, that would be, limited suitability for that particular category. So as you can see, all the 4 highest ranked here, completely in the high suitability optimal with an occasional moderate suitability, all very high. The first being San Marcos, including the core of San Marcos, it did very well. Vista, number 2, in unincorporated county, actually, Fallbrook and Pala, we've received public comments over the years that is a need, and it did show up in our analysis as well, highly ranked, especially on the equity side, the need to provide connectivity for those communities where we do not have very much fixed route bus service. And then for the Oceanside Eastern Core, just to provide some context, Eastern Core is the communities just to the east of where the current Go Side NEV runs. So this would include the communities of Loma Alta, Fire Mountain, parts of the airport industrial area, with some connections to Oceanside Transit Center and El Camino Real. Next slide. Our anticipated service plan is to run this service 7 days a week between the hours of 6 a.m. and 9 p.m., which would be a larger span of service than was currently run that was run previously on the Carlsbad connector. And the idea here is to be able to facilitate more of those later evening trips. Some of those trips that are for folks that might have more non-traditional schedules. There will be an opportunity in meeting with each community to be able to tailor this service plan to best meet the needs of the customers in their community. So if we find out that, on the weekends, we might want to run it a little bit late, start a little bit later, we can do that prior to service implementation. We have the ability to do that. We also have the ability to make minor service changes to the geographic range of the zone to include some things that might not have been included originally. However, we want to keep those fairly limited to the optimal service size of no more than 10 square miles, because once you go beyond that, it becomes very difficult to maintain a high quality of service for the customer. You end up with very long wait times. Then secondly, here you have the phasing, starting with San Marcos and Vista. We're going to start with San Marcos hopefully in June of 2024. And then move to San Marcos in April. Then these April and October dates coincide with our major service change dates for other services, all the fixed route. And so that's why you see the April and October alternating as time goes on. Next slide. Projected cost for the trip. At the beginning, we just wanted to kind of re-emphasize that point Chris made and early on that there are higher costs per trip associated with this type of demand response microtransit service. And so you see that some recent implementations, kind of in our state with LA Metro, Sacramento, and OCTA, the cost ended up being between $43 and $78 per passenger trip. With the Carlsbad connector, we saw $65 per passenger trip. However, because the Carlsbad connector was a partnership with Sandag and with the city of Carlsbad, the cost board on NCTD was about half of that per trip because there was significant contribution from those partners. And just as a basis of comparison, we wanted to show what it costs per breeze trip. So a breeze trip on fixed route is $12.41 per trip. So kind of showing that there are increases in terms of what this costs on a per trip basis to provide a level of service. And then below is a breakdown of the estimated costs. These costs could vary based upon the demand and utilization that's out in the field. It is a on-demand service. So the more demand that there is out there, we want to see the ridership, but it also increases the cost as we have to add additional vehicles and operators to meet the service need. Next slide. For the fare structure that's proposed, our proposal is to align this fare with our other demand response services, Flex and Lift. And so with both of those services, the base fare is a $5 fare for a trip. However, we also want to be very cognizant that we want to encourage folks to be able to use this to be able to connect to our transit services. So to that respect, we would like to offer a discount for passengers choosing to connect to or from an NCTD service center or transit center, so that they would have a $2.50 trip, basically equivalent to our Breeze fare. And that matches the fare that was provided via the previous Carlsbad connector, which did require a transfer to and from the Poinsettia coaster station. So we want to make sure those folks are getting a discount. The other area where we think it makes a lot of sense to do a discount is for what we're calling pooled trips. So when you make a reservation, you actually have to say how many people are coming with you on this trip. Kind of like you would, so you would do one person, two persons. I have 5 people going on with me on the trip, and that makes sure that there's enough seats available in the vehicle they're going to route to you for the service. Any person on the trip beyond the first person, so passengers 2 through, let's say, 6, instead of being assessed $5 per passenger, the first passenger will be $5. All subsequent passengers in that reservation would get that discounted cost at $2.50. And so that's going to make a big difference as, let's say, a family of 4 is deciding to ride the system. Instead of being charged $20 for that fare, it would go down to about $12.50. And so that's really key for us to make sure that we are prioritizing those pool trips. Last piece I'll make on this, initially, we are not going to have a Pronto integration. However, that's in the pipeline. We wanted to wait to make sure that we were moving forward with the service before dedicating those resources. That's going to be a pretty resource intense endeavor to make that connection. But on the roadmap, we do have the ability to provide a connection so that folks who have Pronto stored value on their accounts could use that stored value to pay for their transit trip. Next slide. So moving on in terms of funding strategy, we are, as it's been mentioned previously, I think, on this, and it was mentioned in Sereno Valley Coaster Connection. It's the same situation. This service is subject to available funding in our fiscal year 25 budget. To date, there's been no external sources of funding that have been secured. We are continuing to seek those grants and partnerships to have the service continue long-term. And that goes for service zones that might be, if you rated in the tier 2 or tier 3 and weren't immediately, for the pilot, we still want to see if we can get funding for it. Because if we can identify funding for those services, it's not necessarily something we're not willing to do. We are willing to go ahead and prioritize some of these other zones if we can find a way to be able to have a cost sharing agreement of some sort, identify funds and grants. And the same applies to these initial zones, trying to extend it beyond the 12-month pilot. The idea is we commit for the 12 months, but to get beyond that 12 months, if it's successful, we're going to need to see some sort of partnership model to be able to sustain this service in the future. Last slide. So our timeline for right now, we're going to do some outreach to those tier 1 communities, those tier 1 service zones. And that's really so that we can make sure we refine the service to best reflect the needs of those communities. In May and June, looking to go through marketing and promotion of the service, budget approval, and then our goal would be to launch the first service zone in San Marcos on in the second week of June. That will enter the monitoring and evaluation period, and then hopefully launch Vista in April of 2025. Thank you. That's time for any questions you might have.
Thank you for the presentation. Very informative. I'm sure there are going to be plenty of questions, but before we move to questions, Suhel, are there any public comments on this item?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one. John Mosher is here to speak. Mr. Mosher, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is John Moser. I live in San Marcos, actually San Marcos Mobile Estates, mobile home park. The reason I'm here is because I've talked to my city too about how we move our seniors around. If you could bring up slide 37 of that presentation. I'm looking at how to get us as groups to the stores, to the city center. And slide 37 shows the actual map that is laid out for the area right now. And I know you mentioned that you could have adjustments in the future. If you keep going, get to 37, it actually shows our city better. And working to get us as groups out to,
Yes, it's in the analysis.
Yeah, it's page 37 following that. It's in that group. Oh, okay. Anyway, right where I live on a corner of Barham and Lama Ray, we actually have 4 mobile home parks stacked together, and we're right on the border, right next to Escondido. I brought our layouts with it for the mobile home parks of the city to give to you guys for reference. And I've got 707 residences within maybe a couple square miles at the most. We're really densely packed, but we're outside of that area from what you're showing. And we have a lot of development going on in San Marcos right now, the North City, the Restaurant Row's being revitalized. I try and get people over to the Winco Shopping Center area where they got restaurants plus food, which you can afford it. On the other side of the freeway, jumping Barham to Nordal, you go over to Walmart and Costco. So some of our people would definitely benefit by having access to those, and as a group is what I'm seeing. As we get older, where I live, I probably have an average age of like 76 plus where I live. We've got 234 residents just in my area. So I've been working on this. I first met Mr. Desmond back in 2017, talking to them about help for our area for different reasons. And Deputy Mayor Jenkins, when she first brought up this microtransit in December, we were all excited at the board meeting, and then especially Tuesday when it came out that our city would be one of the first. So I want to thank you for that. And I'm trying to help our seniors. You'll see me around everywhere because I mean, the time is now to help them going forward. Anyway, thank you for your time. Also, I just want to say I use the buses going back to school, Palomar, Cal State San Marcos. And then when I graduated, I went to work downtown for Sempra, so I used the coaster. So I want to thank you for that service. And I know how important groups of people on transportation and how easy it can make your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Appreciate your comments. Staff, maybe you could have a discussion and look at the map and see if it's how far outside the service area that you've identified this might be. I think that may be something that we'd all be interested in. I'm seeing some head nods here. Thank you. Okay, so board questions and comments. Board Member Hensy.
Thank you. I think those of us that are not in this tier 1 are a little bit jealous, but I'm excited that it's happening anyways. And I hope that we find success doing it. The city of Encinitas is really interested in having a local shuttle service, which sounds like it's microtransit. It's part of our climate action plan. Last night, we approved a grant for a study, which we anticipate getting because it's a non-competitive grant. Does that duplicate the efforts that you've already done with your analysis? Or I think part of our goal is even to engage NCTD in providing that service. Is that something that you're encouraging us to do, or should we go it alone and try to figure out if this is something we could stand up as a city?
Happy to work with the city on it, and would be beneficial for both if you leverage the work we already did, so that either it informs your grant process or we can help with what you're doing. I'm not familiar with the grant you're applying for, but we've produced a lot of good data around these zones, so would love to share that with your city and have you leverage that. And if you move forward and are successful, love to help implement what you produce.
Board Member Jenkins.
Couple of questions. On your page with the dollar signs at the bottom. In simplistic terms, does this mean the microtransit costs 3 times the amount of the fixed route, or is that not?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to clarify that. And then I think we spoke about this at a previous meeting. The Carlsbad connection that we had going a couple of years ago. You've incorporated the positives and the negatives into all of your analysis.
Yeah.
So we can hopefully have the best outcome possible on all of our pilots. Okay. And then the cost sharing that you spoke about, I think you mentioned when we did the Carlsbad pilot that there was cost sharing with Sandag.
Sandag and the city of Carlsbad.
Okay, is there no money available from Sandag for these sorts of things right now?
Potentially, yes. Our objective is to get the pilots launched, and then we'd be in a position to pursue that money, as well as work with cities to seek funding or to seek an arrangement like we did with the Carlsbad connector.
Okay.
Yep.
And let's see if I have anything else here.
And the 12-month and then continue the pilot is very similar to what Sandag does with their NEV program. So it's a similar structure that they do with the NEV program.
Okay, I think that's all of the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Robbins. You guys can share over there.
I know. Thank you for the presentation and the comment about being jealous, San Marcos gets all the love, but that's okay. Just looking at the implementation date. Just kidding. All the implementation dates. Is there a metric or anything that would speed that up? I mean, because I can just see getting a lot of questions from saying, well, how come it takes so long? Or I'm just kind of curious.
Funding.
Just a matter of
Yeah,
funding.
yeah.
So,
We wanted to, because we're incorporating this within our operating budget, we wanted to make sure we were phased in the implementation. But if we were to identify funding for pilots or any of the other pilots, that would accelerate the implementation.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Contreras.
Thank you so much for the presentation. This is really exciting. It's a little difficult to understand exactly where this is located. Is there a GIS layer that we're, okay. I would ask, and these are conversations that I've been having with our city. I want to get a lot more of those GIS layers that NCTD has and share them with, our different jurisdictions. I think that at our local cities, we can make a big push to show people how to connect in different ways. And I think it would be really beneficial for the city of Vista to see, for us and the residents to see exactly where this is at. So I don't know what the timeline would be to share that information with, at least with my city. I'm guessing the rest of the cities would like it too.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And we do anticipate this to be conceptual. It needs to be conceptual zones and to engage the cities in the actual zone lines themselves. So the point that Mr. Mosier made about tweaking it a bit to capture a good use, we will work with the cities to make sure the zones as designed or as implemented will meet the community need. What we do want to be careful though is that we don't exceed that 10-mile threshold. And the reason is if you do that, then the wait times get too long and it denigrates the service and you don't get the riderships. That's
right. Yeah, that point is very well taken. And along the lines of capturing more folks that might be interested in using the service, I was curious about the mobile home parks and specifically 55 plus communities. And I'll give you an example of the 318 bus goes through Beaubier, and we have a school on one side and we have a senior mobile park on the other side. Not too far from there, it's all uphill though, we have the Melrose Sprinter Station. And I can make that walk. I don't live too far. I live on the back gate of Beaubier. It's about a mile, a little over a mile. So every once in a while I make that walk, but I've had constituents come to me and say, I want to be able to connect to that Sprinter Station a lot better. And specifically folks that live in the mobile park. And the 318 is just not frequent enough for them to be able to make that trip when they want. So I would love to have a deeper dive exactly where these boundaries are. And make sure that we can get folks to the nearest Sprinter Station. And I also am not sure if we're connecting Tri-City Hospital. And I want to make sure that we're doing that too.
So We can certainly provide the GIS layers. Those are available. In fact, we built them first in GIS and was part of doing the suitability analysis. So that's easy to be able to provide that data. A map that shows a little bit closer of the surface zone is on page 43 of the attachment. So if you go here and you get there, but it's nice. We did 1-pagers on each zone, so you can kind of see it front and back. So it has like the boundary of what the zone is, and on the back, there's a little bit of the analysis and kind of how we got to the methodological approach that we took. But absolutely, we could, make some changes to the zone to best meet the needs of the community. Tri-Cities Hospital was not included in that zone. I think it might be a little bit far, but let's look at it. If that's something that's really desirable, I think it's something we go back to the table, take a look and see how we can modify the zone and see how many square miles that would be. Our key concern is that we don't want to end up having 30-minute waits, 40-minute waits for folks to expect the service. We want to try to keep those wait times as close to 15 to 20 minutes as possible.
Yeah, I mean, Vista Way is a critical access point for Tri-City Hospital. Tri-City, is going through being absorbed by UCSD. So there's going to be potentially an increase in the service provided to the community. And that's our community hospital for me, for Carlsbad, right, for Oceanside. And I have just heard how difficult it is for folks to access the healthcare. And this is a perfect opportunity for us to look at reducing social determinants of health and making sure that folks can make it to their preventative and follow-up, right, healthcare appointments. That to me is like not negotiable. We need to be able to connect there. On the funding side, and this is a conversation I had with you, Chris, when we were reviewing this agenda item. It's a little difficult to tell on this fee structure, but could there be something done a little bit maybe easier for the cities? Say, Vista wanted to jump the queue and go into a more activate the pilot faster. What would that cost us? And same for the other cities. Potentially, it might be worth it. I don't know what the number is, so I can't tell you that we can do it or not.
So conceptually, what our strategy will be is to develop that exact cost model, so we can say to you it's X per hour of operation, and your city can make a determination if it's, if you're able to subsidize it or what. So we will, that's part of the exercise we'll go through as we launch the pilots and get some learnings, is to develop that model for the partnerships with the cities or other entities.
Perfect. And being able to kind of leap off of that work, it was stated that this is very similar to what we're doing in Sorrento Valley. So could that potential fee structure also be something that we can use to talk to those employers to see, or is it going to be different? I'm just trying to see how much we get out of the same work.
Potentially, obviously with private entities, it would look a little different than it does with cities, but yeah, potentially. And in fact, in the conversation yesterday that we were in at Biocom, there was some interest among property owners around their need to meet their TDM, transit demand management obligations, and using this as a vehicle through which they could meet those TDM obligations. So.
Awesome. Thank you. My last question is there room on these for grocery carts, like, the foldable ones that people use, strollers? I don't see any bike racks. I know I've asked for that in the past and you all said no, I believe. Is there any change in that?
They will operate as these vehicles operate now. So there's limited capacity for some of those type items, but we can look at it.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just thinking a family, that has a stroller, are they going to be able to take this, or is there just not going to be
the stroller?
room?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll have some parameters around, because it's required around car seats and things that we'll need to implement. So there's some nuance there, but yes.
Okay, perfect. And thank you so much. I'm really excited to see this move forward. Thanks.
Board Member Desmond, and then Hensy, then Martinez.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, to
And
Mr.
Jenkins.
Mosier's point in San Marcos, he's just outside the boundaries with the mobile home park, and I know with the density that you have at mobile home parks of people that probably could use this service. I'm just wondering, you know, this is a pilot program, so maybe some of these lines are malleable a bit.
Absolutely.
As we move on and
Yep.
see if that might work and pick up extra mobile home park.
And you'll notice the same thing at Palomar East West. It's right on
Oh,
the
is it?
same, right on the same border. But part of that is, we can also, put them in the zone so that there's a stop right there, right? So they could come to the stop, come out of the park right in the stop, get picked up at this, there on demand as well. So there's ways for us to incorporate those. So absolutely. We'll work with the
As
city
it
to do
goes.
that.
Okay. Thanks.
Perfect. I think Henzie Martinez Jenkins.
Yeah, just a quick question of clarification. So the estimated costs of 2.56 million over the course of 4 years, that's for all 4 areas, right?
Correct.
That's a really good deal, I feel.
Yeah, and it's based on a level of demand that we hope to reach. So we think we think we can implement this efficiently. We have the vehicles in place, you know, so we think we're well positioned to do that. So
Yeah, I'm like, why did we pay for the grant last night? The study, we could have just paid for, I mean, this implementation. All right, we got to think about that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Martinez?
Thank you. Just a logistics question. So in scheduling this, can riders schedule a day or two in advance, for instance, if they have an appointment at a hospital or a physician's office?
Yeah, that's possible. It's something we're going to have to decide as part of our service planning process for it. From some of the other microtransit providers across the country that have implemented before us, what they've said about making the reservations too far in advance is that we end up getting very large numbers of no-shows. And so what it does is it takes up a seat for someone else who actually needs it in the moment. And then there becomes a little bit of an issue with those no-shows. So we have the ability to do it. I think it's something we're going to have to consider very carefully. Maybe we do open it up initially 1 day in advance so they can make the appointment. But we want to be very cognizant of that our peers that we spoke to across the nation had some struggles with that and having so many no-shows that it really degraded the level of service for people who needed that demand response service in the moment. I'm trying to get from the station right now. You know, the bus was out trying to make a trip for someone to no show for
I
that particular
completely
trip.
understand
Yeah.
that. On
Yeah.
the other hand, it gives people
Yep,
certainty.
absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
sometimes no-shows are diminished when there's a charge for not showing. I know that from my other professional life. I could talk to you about that.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, and this is kind of redundant, but it seems like you would start with vehicles that you have already.
Correct.
Yep.
Do you already have the electric neighborhood vehicles yet? You
No,
don't have
no.
those. So I guess as a new person on the board, what is the goal? And I know we're, talking about sustainability, but when you would, if this were to be very successful, which I hope it is, and you needed to acquire new vehicles, would those new vehicles not be electric?
Potentially, yeah. So part of this, and interestingly, this service is actually well suited for electric vehicles. The challenge is the market of this size vehicle, the electric vehicles available is actually pretty slim at the moment. There are a few options, but they're not great. So as more potential vehicles that fit the service model come on market, this service actually is well suited for electric because the vehicle does have downtime in between rides, and so you could charge it, in between rides, those sorts of things. Currently, there's not a good option out there, but that's something we would look at into the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Jenkins.
A question and a comment. So this is a presentation today. When does this come back to the board for approval? Did you tell us that? And I
So,
missed it?
yeah, so it's a pilot program, so it wouldn't come back to the board
At all.
discreetly. You would see it as it would be incorporated as part of the budget approval. So as you go, the budget would be approved in there. What we would, we'll keep the board informed if the plan changes, and we have a different implementation plan. Meaning if we weren't able to achieve the budget goals and weren't able to implement as planned, as we got through the budget process, so we would inform the board of that. But as long as we meet the budgetary targets in the budget process this spring, the plan would be to go forward and start the service in first week of June.
Okay, so not coming back to us.
Yeah, this doesn't, as a pilot program, and given the service level, it doesn't meet the threshold of a major service change by the board's policy.
Okay, I understand better now. And then I was just going to comment that San Marcos will do their very best to make this hugely successful. So that maybe things can move forward quicker. I'm thinking of outreach that are you gonna be talking to the city about outreach and coordinating all of that and Cal State and Palomar and Kaiser and what other, yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll be doing a pretty broad outreach. Already been engaged with the city on that topic and over the next few months as we shore up the operational plan, we'll also be doing the promotional plan.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you. So as, gosh, let's see. Most of my questions were asked, which generally happens when it finally gets around to me. But basically, I share the jealousy factor with Encinitas, and we know that. I realized that Solana Beach and Del Mar, being tiny, have been grouped into one city and one tiny city still, even that's both of us. Yes, we're used to that. So kind of following up on the statement in the staff report that NCTD will work with interested communities on securing funding for microtransit zones that are not included in the initial pilot's scope. Do we have the bandwidth, say if a city, like if our cities bind together, Del Mar has something called Del Mar Community Connections, Solana Beach has a kind of brand new Solana Beach Community Connections because someone moved from Del Mar to Solana Beach and brought that concept with them. And I know that our Chamber of Commerce is really excited and interested in also providing some sort of microtransit service throughout the city to help with our businesses, which are kind of in separate areas in our tiny little city. So, I mean, what is the bandwidth for us? Can we take on anything else if cities do come up with the funding or want a private public kind of partnership with you?
Yes, so we can, and what we're in the presentation, we referenced our agreement with MV Transportation around the operator pool. And so as we're working on that amendment, we're writing in the ability to increase the operator pool at our discretion if we need to. So the idea there is if we have a lot of demand and we recognize that if we just added X more operators, we could go into another zone. We have the capacity to do that based on funding.
Okay, great. So then that would go back to Karina's question, excuse me, Director Contreras's question about how much money? So we will eagerly await an update on that. I think that will be provided to us offline. Is that correct?
Yeah, as we get closer to implementation, and we develop that partnership model for the interested cities, and glad to hear you're all interested. So that'll expedite our development of that model. So yes, and the Sandag model, they currently have this arrangement through VIA. It's kind of a similar thing, and their number is about $99 per operating hour is what they charge. We think we would come in significantly below that in terms of a partnership with the city. So that could give you kind of a model. Like if you wanted to have a zone, it would be somewhere 99 would be per hour would be the upper threshold. We would likely come in quite under that. Great.
Well, that at least gives us something to compare and think about and digest. I think that's all for my questions. There was a question from actually board member Martinez about how often will we be updated on progress, but the answer that you gave to board member Jenkins is never.
Yeah, so sorry, that wasn't my intention. We will include the ridership. So your monthly transit operations report will include the ridership for this. So you'll see that every month in your monthly operations report.
I knew it couldn't be never. Thank you.
And with all green dots next to it.
I appreciate that. So we're not voting on this item. It's just moving forward. This is informational. So next on the agenda is an update on the district's sustainability and climate action plan. Lillian Dwardy, come on down. Lillian is NCTD's Director of Planning and Development, and she will be presenting this very important item. Welcome, Lillian. And Lillian, you have the floor. I ate today and I can't talk anymore. I don't know, it's too much food.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today I am joined by Luis Banyas and Emma Sorrell, who is joining us virtually from the Cummings Group. They are our project management team for the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. Also on the virtual world with us today is Katie Cole from Fair and Pierce, who developed our greenhouse gas emissions calculator. This initiative kicked off in January of 2023, and we are pleased to bring forward this update to the board today. Our Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, or SCAP, provides a framework for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and demonstrates our commitment to climate action and sustainability. Next slide. And CTD has been a member of the FTA Sustainable Transit for a Healthy Planet Challenge since 2022. We're excited to share our plan with transit agencies across the nation who have joined together as part of this challenge to reduce emissions levels nationwide. Through this plan, we envision that we will be able to be more competitive for grant funding programs to further progress our existing initiatives that are already underway and to begin new sustainable and climate-friendly actions, plans, programs that are recommended by this plan. Next slide. This plan leverages our 2021 emissions information to develop NCTD's baseline emissions. This provides a starting point for which we may continue to biannually measure our progress. Against this baseline, the SCAP team developed policies, programs, and projects that could accomplish the goal to reduce the district's emission levels. It is important to note that our SCAP considers only those operations that we have in place today and doesn't include or contemplate future operations, additional modes, such as microtransit that we heard today, increased frequency or additional routes. The recommendations and strategies in this plan are focused on our current sources of emissions and how to reduce those emissions from those sources. Our goal is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 in alignment with Assembly Bill 1279 and federal targets. Next slide. The SCAP was developed over a 6-phase process that included baselining, research, modeling, plan development, and stakeholder research and input. Next slide. The stakeholder research, outreach and input was developed in a 3-tier outreach strategy, which included engagement with the communities that we serve, as well as those who share our rail lines and stakeholders in our operations. We also engage community and non-governmental groups to solicit input and feedback on our plan. Next slide. The 8 goals developed in the SCAP were ultimately developed to cover all aspects of our operations, from our modes and facilities to our policies and our programs. Within these larger goal areas, the plan describes 41 strategies to mitigate and reduce the NCTD carbon footprint. This is a tactical implementation plan that considers timeframes, costs, and feasibility. These strategies allow us to be flexible and responsive to grant opportunities. It is not necessary to implement all 41 strategies, but rather to adapt to our capabilities and resources. Through prioritized selection of the strategies, we can continue over time to make steps that will allow us to accomplish our 2050 carbon neutrality goal. Next slide. This concludes my presentation. Our team is now available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian. For the presentations who held, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll move to board comments and questions. Anybody? Board Member Contreras.
I don't really have much to say. It's just that this is incredible and I really appreciate us moving forward in this direction. Are we the only transit agency in the region that has an SCAP?
I did reach out to MTS. My understanding is that they do not have an SCAP at this time, so we are excited to lead the way.
Yay, we're leading. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, seeing no further questions, thank you very much. And thank you for your team coming to not answer any questions. I think because this was such a thorough report and you provided so much great information to us that you pretty much answered our questions right here. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Of course. This brings us to the Executive Director's report. But before calling on Mr. Ballard, I want to take a moment to thank him for his gracious leadership and collaboration during his time with the district. He was instrumental in guiding the board through our successful recruitment of our next chief executive officer, and for that, we are ever so grateful. Mr. Ballard, Paul, I'd like to personally thank you for your dedication and service to NCTD. Thanks for hopping on board with us. It's been an honor to work with you. Okay, so now it's your turn.
Well, my comments are going to kind of echo what you just said. I would like to thank the board for the confidence that you placed in me, based largely on Matt's word that that I would be the right person. But I do want to say it's truly been a real pleasure to work with each and every one of you as individuals and as a board. I've been doing this a long time, and this is one of the best boards I've ever worked with. You folks are involved. You work hard. You work long hours. You know, going through that selection process, I can't count the hours that board members put in to that, and you got a great result. But I also want to say that you have a superb staff that works here. From my first day, they have supported me personally. They've supported the district, and I think we've become a really good working team, and one that I've already told Sean he's going to be very fortunate to step into and be able to work with them. And also, you're going to really enjoy working with Sean Donaghy. As most of you know, I've known him for a number of years. We worked together in Fort Worth, where I was the CEO, and he was our chief operating officer. After a couple of years, he went up to C-Tran and has done a superb job as the CEO up in Vancouver. So I just want to say and congratulate the board on making an excellent choice. And if it gets out of line, just call me. I know the key words to talk with him, but sincerely, thank you very much. You've all made this a great pleasure, and I hope that I've left it a little better than I found it. So thank you very much.
Thank you again. Actually, thank you. Okay, board members, you have an opportunity for a brief report. Does anyone have one? Board Member Lee.
Just to share a quick update. So I know I've had a chance to see you both, see you all in the last 2 or 3 meetings. But I chair both our budget and our land use committees on the city of San Diego side. And so many of those meetings will be overlapping in months coming up. And so just wanted to share that on the city of San Diego side, we have appointed an alternate, Madison Coleman. She's a member of our team in the District 6 office. So you'll see her soon, I think, in future meetings as well. Just wanted to share that. You'll still see me on occasion, at least when the meetings don't overlap. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure that you'll share those details with our clerk. Thank you very much. And we will welcome Madison. Sale, do we have any remaining public comments?
No, Madam Chair.
At this time, public registration to speak has ended. Thank you all. The next scheduled meetings are the Marketing Service Planning and Business Development, as better known as MISPDA Committee, on March 5th, 2024 at 1 p.m. The regular board meeting, March 21st, 2024 at 2 p.m. This meeting is adjourned in honor of Mr. Paul J. Ballard.
Thank you.
All right.